Another day, another FPL vid. Jack, what are we talking about today?
Josh, today we're going to address one of the most prevailing FPL myths around, and that is should you or should you not back the early kickoff in a game week? So, as the great Gandhi once said, quoted, never back the early kickoff. Avoid doing that. Wise words from a great man. But is he right? Is Gandhi right? Is it true that you just shouldn't back an early kickoff? So what we've done, each of us have done a little bit of research, haven't we? You've done the research on the Friday night games, so the earliest kickoff possible of the game week. And then I've done the research looking at the 12:30 kickoffs, so like the early in the day kickoffs of the game week. Because I think it's the kind of prevailing wisdom, or it's kind of often parroted, isn't it, that you should avoid captaining a player in these fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who are we to, doubt Gandhi,
Hmm.
first and foremost? And secondly, just on a personal note, I'm not like a particularly superstitious person, I don't think, but it's always in my mind when you want to captain someone for that early kickoff. It's just there, isn't it? You're thinking, oh, dude, the
Mm.
omens are bad. The omens are bad for the early kickoff. But
Yeah,
I'm really interested to see what the conclusion is here, like data wise.
yeah, me too. I mean, I've often, before we get into it, you've mentioned your own normal feelings about it, and I've felt the same. I've kind of fell sucker to it before, like you just don't want. But part of me is like, is it just because it's a vibe, it's a feeling that if you're captain blanks in the first game, you're then miserable the rest of the game week? Because there's often the inverse as well. If you captain someone on the last game, you've always got that hope going into it. Like no matter how badly the other games have gone for you, you've got that last little bit of hope. So, but all of that is just irrelevant mental stuff, isn't it? It's not actual logic or actual facts. So yeah, let's find out,
Really?
shall we? So teach me, Josh, teach me about the Friday night games. Should I captain someone in a Friday night game, or should I avoid it?
Well, yeah, I looked at the data from this season that we're in right now, which is the 2023-2024 season. And we've had, a decent data size. So we're up to kind of game week 24. So far, there's been 8 Friday fixtures. Obviously, it doesn't happen every week. And I've looked at what the results were in those fixtures for those Fridays. Tried to firstly look at, are there results that are kind of unexpected results? So are there kind of teams that are performing strangely underperforming or teams that are overperforming on those particular game weeks? Like, does it create strange results first and foremost? And then taking a little look at what the actual player um, points have been for those particular games, and then a very quick look at like common captain people, the big premiums basically when people would have captained this season and how they performed in these Friday fixtures versus their average points per game for the season.
Mhm.
So starting with the team's results, I mean, not a lot to shout about. The results have generally gone as you'd expect when you look at those. So the first one, game week 1 for the season, Burnley at home to Man City, kicking off this season. 3-0 win for City. So like basically what you'd expect even with the away result.
Mm.
And you look through the other ones like game week 2, Nottingham Forest beating Sheffield 2-1 at home. So like they're close ones, but like the home fixture, and there aren't really any anomalies. So first and foremost, you think, well, the results are going generally as you'd expect. So there's nothing crazy about a Friday fixture due to creating any like anomalies or anything there. Um, was that before I move on to the players? Is that kind of what you'd expect, or were you thinking it would just be Friday's just another
Mhm.
game, or was it going to have an impact on what you'd expect to see?
Yeah, in my mind, it's like evening games have more goals in them. They're like the Friday night lights. It's like a spectacle. So in my mind, that's how I envision them. Same with like the Super Sunday games or the Saturday evening game. You imagine there'll be more goals. And I guess in those four you mentioned that like they've averaged 3 goals a game, which is higher than average. So I guess maybe there are more goals on a Friday.
Yeah, I know you've covered in your data like the average goals and where the
Mhm.
kickoffs go. So I won't go into that too much, but
Yeah.
I guess I've tried to my mindset for mine was if you're looking to captain someone, it's like how are they performing as you'd expect? Because if you're thinking about picking them on a Friday, you probably would have picked them on any other day. And it's like, well, is there any reason that you wouldn't pick them on a Friday? That like the team wouldn't perform or the player wouldn't perform.
Mm.
So yeah, in terms of the team, data doesn't show really that there's any crazy results from Fridays. So
Mm.
that's one thing. In terms of the players, well, if I look at the big ones, so like Haaland, for example, this season has only played one Friday. It's a bit of obviously a small sample size. Scored 13 points, not bad. His average points per game is 7. So obviously it's only one game, so it's like he outperformed it massively. But
Mhm.
even for that one game, you'd say there's Haaland doesn't get any Friday night nerves or anything, which is causing him to not get it. Salah hasn't played any Friday night games. Liverpool haven't played any Friday night games, so we can't look at that.
Mm.
Another one that I picked out was Son for this season. So he's played two,
Mm.
and he averaged 6 points. So I think he had a 10-point return and a 2-point return. So like
Mm.
positive and negative there. And his average points per game for this season so far is 6.7. So he's like just under. But generally, what you're seeing is, well, there's not a lot you can tell from that small sample size, but there isn't anything crazy that we can see from there. Um, and generally looking at the players that have performed well on the Fridays, over the 8 fixtures, there have been 7 players that have been in the team of the week
Right, that's
across
interesting.
games. So, there are players that are performing well on that Friday night. Like you said, there's goals and they're getting good points and they are getting into the team of the week. So it's not like they're dudding. He was the only one to get the highest points for the game week
Mm.
out from a Friday night fixture. Got 19 points in game week 3 when Chelsea beat Luton 3-0. And that was the highest points return for any single player in that game week. So I think generally speaking, there's nothing to say that Friday fixtures create strange results or
Mm.
create dud fixtures, low scoring fixtures, or any reason why a player wouldn't get points. I think these 7 players in the team of the week kind of leaned towards that. Um, but yeah, what are your thoughts on all of that summary?
Mm. To me, the big message is it's a Friday night game is an average game, like average goals scored. Like you say, some high point scorers, nothing out of the ordinary. Typically a double digit scorer most games, being the high scorer. But the thing that I like, the team of the week count is interesting because there's 8 games. There's been 8 games, and they've had 7 players in the team of the week. Was it?
Yeah,
So yeah, 7 players in the week. So that's an average of one, pretty much an average of one a game. And so there are 10 games each week. So 11 players in team of the week. So an average of probably one player per game. So again, it's just bang on average. It's just a
yeah.
bang on average fixture that, like you say, you shouldn't shy away from because it's on the Friday night. If you've got a good player playing in it, Haaland's hauled in it, Sterling, Son, like they've players haul on a Friday night. So
Yeah,
ignore
and I,
your urge to avoid.
Yeah, exactly. That's what my thoughts were as well. And the one thing I would add as a final point, maybe for the Fridays, is there aren't many fixtures for the big teams, like maybe the
Mm,
top 4 or 5 teams, and I think that's because of the European games as well. So,
yeah.
like City have only had one, Liverpool have had none, Arsenal none,
Mm.
for example. So I think that's had a play. Like Tottenham have had 2, but and you can see Chelsea have had one here. Big Villa have had one as well. But
Big
it's
European side, yeah.
I think a lot of the big assets aren't going to be getting the Friday fixtures, which may skew it for the people that are wanting to choose them as captains. But
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. And yeah, that feeds into a little bit into my research, which we can move on to now, if you like.
go for it.
So I was looking at the 12:30 kickoff specifically because these ones really seem they're more common than the Friday night games. and they really seem to be the ones that people hate captaining a player in. And there seems to be like a lot of confidence when people say, "Oh, it's an early kickoff, don't do it. Lunchtime kickoff, no goals, rubbish." So I did a bit of research on it, kind of expecting that to be the case. But interestingly, I found the opposite to be true, which was a real surprise. So there are a few articles I looked at. So the Pinnacle.com did an article. It was around betting, like it's a betting gambling website about like gambling tactics and stuff. But they did a whole piece on this based on games from the last couple of years.
Mm.
Uh, and they showed the um the amount of games they looked at, the kickoff time, and the amount of goals scored in each of the kickoff times on average. And they concluded that, I'll read this out to you. Despite perception, early games have featured at least 3 goals more frequently than any other time slot. And they're second for those that saw 4 or more. Um, it seems that evening kickoffs should carry the reputation that currently belongs to lunchtime games because they saw the inverse. It was actually the evening 5:30 kickoffs that had the least amount of goals. So I'll
Huh.
put this table up that shows that they studied 1,520 games. The early kickoffs, the lunchtime kickoffs, had the fewest amount of nil-nils, and it had the second highest percentage of goals over four games over 4 goals, which is just like completely not what you'd expect at all. Um, but an interesting point that I found that kind of goes into what you were saying about the big teams not being scheduled for Friday fixtures. And this concluded that, however, the answer for that likely rests in the hands of the TV companies in the UK. The data shows that the established Big Six clubs of English football play on the road in early kickoffs far more often than they appear at home.
Hmm.
This increases the likelihood of them suffering a poor result, according to the bookies. So I thought that was interesting. So actually, the Big Six do play earlier, more in the 12:30 kickoff more than other clubs because it's a TV slot, obviously. But that point about the away fixtures was quite interesting. So they're trying to angle for some drama, and I thought that with that Burnley Man City game you mentioned,
Yeah,
which was
on the Friday.
the very first fixture of the season, they were obviously hoping for that. I remember when Brentford came up, they beat Arsenal in that fixture, the very first fixture of the season. It was like a sensational TV event because they'd just beaten this plucky Brentford had beaten Arsenal in their first ever Prem game. Um, so that was cool. But then from a site called The Analyst, I found a really interesting graph that I'll show up here. And it actually plots on the x-axis, you've got average XG per game, which it says like measures excitement because there's a lot of XG, there's a lot of action. And then the average goals per game on the y-axis, with the average being in the middle, being 2.8. And it plots out all the time slots. So on the far right, with really high XG, but actually not that high goals per game, is the Sunday at 4 o'clock. So really exciting game, um, but lowish, still above average goals, but fairly low. The kind of creme de la creme is the Sunday 4:30 game, really high XG, really high goals per game, really good. But then the kind of second highest for well, the third highest for XG and the third highest for goals per game. So like kind of the second most exciting when you combine them is the Saturday 12:30 kickoff, which seems crazy to me, but it is the truth. And actually Saturday 3 o'clock has a really low has a much lower than average goals per game. So like the bog standard Saturday 3 o'clock kickoffs have lower than average goals per game at 2.6 instead of 2.8. Um, and they're pretty much bang on average for XG at about 2.5, 2.6, sorry. So basically the Saturday 12:30 kickoff beats the typical 3 p.m. kickoff and a load of others. So they've got like Wednesday 7:45, Sunday midday, all these other niche ones that happened. Um, but it shows that the 12:30 in terms of action is you're more likely to get more action than you are a 3 o'clock kickoff. So there you go. What do you make of all
Gandhi
that?
lied. Gandhi lied. I mean, you can't argue that I did. Well, I can't argue with it because I think it covers so much data. The number of matches that
Yeah,
these
1,500.
two things are comparing, and yeah, the graph clearly shows, doesn't it, that apart from the Super Sunday stuff and
Mm.
the televised games there, then the 12:30 on Saturday is the next biggest, and as you said, making that link to the kind of making it a spectacle because they are the TV slots makes
Mm.
complete sense, and it's something that I've never really even thought about
It
before.
does, doesn't it? Yeah, especially that lunch, like the Super Sunday, you think, okay, there will be spectacles, Super Sunday.
Yeah,
But the fact that like the lunchtime slot is a TV slot, so they're gonna want a good game in it. They're not gonna want to put a dud game in there. So it makes, yeah, it makes perfect sense, like you say. Another this analyst site had a really good bunch of these charts, but the only other one I brought up was interesting. Interesting, the Saturday 12:30 kickoff has far and away more red cards than
Hmm.
any other fixture. So it averages 0.19 red cards per game, which is mad compared to, and then the next highest is 0.14, which is Tuesday at 7:45, which is like a dud one, really. Um, and the average being 0.12. So almost double the amount of red cards in the lunchtime kickoff, which is kind of crazy. But I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting of note. Again, adds to that spectacle. Um, so then I just did what essentially what you did, Josh, and I looked at the results from this season in the early kickoff. So there are more 12:30 kickoffs than there are Friday night ones. So we've had how many? So 15 this season. We're in game week 20. What are we? 24, 25, game week 24, and we've had 15 early kickoffs. So I looked at the results. So there were no nil-nils in any of them. The average goal was exactly three goals per game. So there are a few 1-nils in there, a few 2-nils, but there are some massive spectacle games that I wouldn't have remembered were the 12:30 kickoff. So Villa 6-1 Brighton, like a massive game for Villa that was. Crazy game. Watkins scored 21 points in that. Luton
Massive.
Chelsea 3-2 to Chelsea. Again, Palmer got 18 points, like a massive, massive haul. Uh, a few 2-2s here and there. Yeah, just great. Just really 3-1s, like a lot of high scoring games. Um, and in terms of the highest scorer in those games, they were always in double figures. So the highest one was the Watkins one at 21. Then you had Palmer with 18. You got Richarlison with a 15, Salah with a 16. So I was like, okay, we're talking about captaincy here. So the three players I highlighted that played in these games were Salah, Haaland, and Saka, probably the most common captains. Salah's played three of these. So interestingly, he hadn't played any of your Fridays, had he? Liverpool.
No, none.
So it's that the famous Klopp being upset about them playing 12:30 kickoffs. He's probably got a point because Salah's played three times here. But if every time he's played in those three games, he's scored 13 points, 16 points, and 12 points.
Jeez.
So he's hauled in every single 12:30 kickoff. And those will be the exact times when people are like, oh, it's the early kickoff. No, I won't put it on Salah. Um, so yeah, Haaland's played in one of them, 13 points, City versus Everton, easy peasy. Saka has played in, I think he played maybe in a couple of them. No, maybe just the one, and he got 10 points, so didn't blank. 10 points, you take that from your captain all day against
Yeah.
Forest. So it's like, again, this data of this season backs up the points from the research above, which says not only should you not avoid the early kickoff, you should probably target it if you've got a captain playing in it, like a potential captain playing in it. It's like the absolute opposite of the Gandhi principle.
Gandhi lied. That should be a tagline. Gandhi lied.
Gandhi is a liar. Gandhi lied. He
uh,
did. Um,
yeah. Well, I think you've answered, like,
yeah.
looking at the data above. One question I was going to hit you with at the end was your date. Like, all the analysis shows that there's lots of goals in that fixture, so that's great. But one of the points that they said in that article was the big six teams may be getting an away fixture. And it's like, well, are those goals coming in the right places for your assets? But I think from this second part that you've kind of just presented now, they are. I think I guess the big six being the big six, it being an away fixture actually might bring the other team out to play a bit more and create more opportunity for them to score. So it's not a negative. It's actually, we're looking at the double digit hauls of, the Salahs, the Haalands, and even past them like Richarlison and Watkins. That these are all the names that people are going to be picking, aren't they, from those fixtures potentially?
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back, I think we did another video about worrying about fixtures for attacking players, didn't we? And the conclusion was you don't need to worry about fixtures for your best attacking assets because the data shows they don't care. They score against anyone. So I imagine that scheduling thing is more of a kind of hopeful thing by the TV companies, and it's not actually data driven. Like Man City away, Liverpool away, Haaland and Salah are probably still going to score
Yeah.
against the weaker opposition, whether they're home or away. Um, yeah, and like you say,
Yeah.
this. I mean, those Salah figures really show it. I think
Yeah.
12:30 kickoffs and like comfortable double digits in all of them. Like that says it all to me.
Consistent. Yeah.
Yeah, just don't worry about it if it's a 12:30. Just don't
Mind
worry
blown,
about
man. Mind
it.
blown.
Yeah,
Mind
mine
blown.
was
Yeah,
blown.
crazy.
My mind was blown. I'm only ever going to captain players in the 12:30 kickoff now. But yeah, but it's that cycle. We've looked at the data there, but it is a like. Do you think there's any weight to the psychological thing of everyone's on about try and enjoy FPL, have fun with it, and it is a bit miserable if your captain blanks early in it, and you're just watching the other points come in for your rivals from other teams. Is there something to be said for just like actually for your own sanity, even though it's against the data, don't do it?
Uh, I don't know. I think if you're going from an enjoyment perspective, then yeah. But if you're looking at just being successful at it, I think follow the data, isn't it? I think a general trend of a lot of the topics we cover is you have to be somewhat robotic, isn't it? Like the perma cap for your best players. It sounds boring, but there's more than enough for you to play with outside of that. And I think if you're just looking for your highest points haul and you want to pick a player and they just happen to be in the early kickoff for captaincy, I mean, that's no reason at all not to captain them because they might not, and then you've got to might not haul, and then you've got to worry for the rest of the 2 days or 3 days into Monday night of not doing anything. So yeah, I wouldn't treat that as a reason to not captain them. Especially looking at this, it's pretty convincing, isn't it?
Mm.
What
Yeah,
about you? Are you any reason why you wouldn't captain now at early kickoff?
not at all. I think it's actually a weird kind of uh fallacy to be like, oh, I'll captain someone in the last kickoff, so I've got I'll be happier and I've got someone to look forward to. Because data wise, it's a fallacy. Like it doesn't matter when the points come in the game week, they'll come and they'll add to your total. But also, even from an enjoyment perspective, I kind of think you almost feel dread a little bit. Like if you've seen Salah's hauled and you didn't captain him, and you're waiting on a Palmer or Watkins that you've punted on in the last fixture. It's not. I don't think it's enjoyment. It's kind of dread. And then as you watch them just slowly blank in that last game, it's just miserable. So I don't think it's any less miserable than if those fixtures have been reversed. Really, I don't know. I just don't think. I think you're just. It's a fallacy, and you think that you'll be happier with it one way around, but you're not. And the data is the same. It's exactly the same. So yeah, it's a funny one. Um, yeah, that's what I think. So I think go for it. Captain early.
Yeah, and I guess for your own enjoyment perspective, trying to get into the habit of just being happy with your captaincy, no matter even if you pick them and they don't haul, and the other player that you wanted to pick hauls, it's just like you pick them for a reason. Just gotta if it works out, great. If it doesn't matter, does it? Like
Yeah, none of it
Move
matters.
on to the next one.
None of it matters in the end. Yeah, if it's really getting you down, then stop playing, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you're not getting anything else out of it. So, like, it's a completely thankless game. But yeah, cool. All right, I think that wraps it up, Joshua. Unless you got anything
Perfect.
else.
Learned a
Yeah.
lot. Thank you. That's good. Gandhi lied. Biggest
Yeah.
point.
Don't believe a word he says. And yeah, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. And if you didn't, don't do those things. Good.
You choose. Cheers.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.
How do I stop recording this? Oh, it's in the more section.